Hey guys, Kevin here. So one day into my new channel, and I already have a challenger for the Antifa Idiot Challenge. So for those of you who don't know, because you haven't seen my other videos, I have a challenge called the Antifa Idiot Challenge. And it's for anyone to the left of, let's say, Milton Friedman, who comes on my channel and starts talking smack in the comment section, or sees a video and wants to challenge me on what I say in my videos. I offer this challenge. If you can name just three policies of the left that you think will help America, if I cannot offer a poignant rebuttal that wipes the floor with your stupid left-wing, hyperbole, then I will submit defeat and go join you at your next Antifa protest, eating churros, wearing a Che Guevara shirt, and beating up a grandma in a wheelchair that you think is a Nazi. I will join you on that, but it will never happen because, let's face it, you're not smart enough. So, let's move on. I have a challenger, and his name is Kick a Shih Tzu. That's his actual name in the comment section. And he says, okay, let's start. Policy number 1, end the war on drugs. Nixon started the war on drugs with the clear intent, knowing it targeted black people. There they go. Right off the bat, we have the race crap, right? These people, they can't just argue on policy. They always have to bring race into it because they have no policies. They have no substance to their debate. So they bring up race and they say, oh, this targets black people, this is racist, blah, 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 and try to attribute false motives to people who can't defend themselves. Anyway, so what? Nixon started the war on drugs. So what? Okay, I agree. We should end the war on drugs. You know how we do that? We build a border and stop the influx of cocaine and heroin. Or we decriminalize drugs and get government out of drugs. But the government the left loves big government, except for when it's telling them they can't smoke pot, So what's it going to be? You want big government or you want limited government? Because you know what? If it was up to me, I'd get rid of the whole federal government. And then states could decide on the issue and we wouldn't have a war on drugs. But I would also say we need a border wall and actually try to stop the human trafficking and all the other garbage that goes on with drug trafficking. Because you know what? The left always want to talk about these countries they think are so great because, oh, this country decriminalized drugs. This country has free health care. Those countries that did that, and there are some, those countries are a lot different culturally than America. If you decriminalize drugs tomorrow in America, you know what would happen? Half the population would become cocaine addicts, addicted to heroin, because we already have a legalized drug, and it's called Oxycontin. And I used to be an Oxycontin addict. For 5 years, I was addicted to opiates and benzodiazepam. And you know what it did for me? It made me lose my first wife, lose a home, put me in the worst position I've ever been in my life, cut off from family. And I was a successful person. I was doing well in life. Could you imagine what would happen to all these other people? Do you know how many friends I lost because of those drugs? They were completely legal. Now, see, when you talk about legal drugs in other countries in our hemisphere, or guns, or whatever the issue is, if you talk about gun control in our hemisphere, it's a lot different than in Scandinavia, where you have white hegemony and you have a higher educated population, smaller countries. Here, we have a gangster culture. It is the Wild West. And we have a culture that promotes all the stuff the left promotes, or is a result of all the garbage and cultural Marxism the left promotes. And that is why, it's a joke. You're not going to decriminalize drugs. You can stop the war on drugs, fine. But if you just stop and let the borders wide open and let all the drugs flow in, we will have a serious problem in this country. And we see it with heroin and opiates right now. Policy number 2. Return the fairness doctrine. So guys, this is censorship, right? The left loves to talk about the fairness doctrine because the fairness doctrine in its plain ideology, in its most basic form, is an idea that says, one side will have some time on the news to argue their point on a story and the other side can argue their point. We had this law in the 1950s and 60s. Okay? And there were shows that were, out there promoting both sides of an argument. That's fine, right? But the left would never stand for that. If you put Ben Shapiro or Dinesh D'Souza next to Rachel Maddow or Stephen Colbert, they would destroy them. And that's why the left already tries to censor everything. The left uses Google to change search results. First page of Google, any political search you do, it's Slate, it's Vox, it's Vice, it's all these left-wing rags like Huffington Post. If we had real fairness doctrine, you know what would be up there? Drudge Report, Daily Caller, all those things would be up there too. The American Standard. That's real fairness, but the left would never stand for that. So who's this guy kidding? So you want the fairness doctrine? Okay, I'll agree to have the fairness doctrine if we can have real representation from both sides. Because it's not the right that runs from all these debates. It's not the right trying to shut down debate on every college campus right now. It's not the right trying to change search results or demonetize videos on YouTube. It's ridiculous. And he goes on to say, blah, 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 fairness doctrine that would have 10-to-1 ratios of shills voices for dissent will be acceptable, but you right-wingers will be the very first to cry and moan fairness doctrine means censorship. No, it means that you get a 1-to-1 ratio of shills and voices of dissent will be represented so that unnecessary propaganda won't be funneled into any people's brains anymore. Unnecessary propaganda, that's all we get from the left. And 1-to-1 shills, why would you want any shills? Like I said, bring out somebody who's actually educated on what they're talking about instead of Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel. Because they'd have to go away if you got a real fairness doctrine. Number 3, return Glass-Steagall. So, for those people who don't know, Glass-Steagall basically separates private banking from investment banking. It lets investment banks stop taking non-government securities or basically just says that you can't have an investment bank taking deposits like a regular bank. It doesn't do anything to fix anything, okay? The law died on its own merit before. It failed on its own in the 1970s. But the thing is that the problem with America's economy, and he says, unless you want more recessions and depressions, the problem with America's economy is we don't have enough recessions and depressions. We are supposed to have boom and bust cycles. Every economist agrees that's the natural order of things. But because we interfere with our normal market, it creates these bubbles, these mega bubbles. On top of that, we're borrowing money at a tremendous rate. And the real answer to our banking problems isn't going out there and messing around with investment banks. Because you know what? Investment banks might be a problem, but they're a micro compared to the macro that is Federal Reserve banking. And the left loves Federal Reserve banking because it's a tenet of socialism. When you have fractional reserve banking and banks can borrow 10 times what they have on deposit, that's why our government is so in debt. But the government needs debt for socialism to work. So that's why the left hates talking about central banking or fractional reserve banking. They want to bother some billionaires about investment banking. And you know what? I don't care. I know billionaires are out there exploiting the system. If we had a fair tax code, they wouldn't be able to, first of all. But second of all, here's the big thing, right? Who cares if somebody's a billionaire? If you have an iPhone X, if you have a new Mazda Miata in your driveway, if you have a 1,800 square foot starter house, you might be, on the lower end of the middle class. But it took me no time at all to have 2 cars in my driveway, to have a 4,000 square foot house, to have, everything a man can want in life. And I still want more. And I can get more. That's the beauty of America. Our nuevo rich are the majority of our rich in this country. 90% of all wealth in America is new wealth. First generation wealth. People like my uncle who grew up poor and became a VP for Nissan. People like my grandpa who went to the war in World War II, got caught and held prisoner, came back to be a farmer and worked his way through the system, at first in the farming, then Farm Bureau, then in banking, ended up owning a bank and dying a millionaire, multi-millionaire. He has land still. My family owns land that was his, that he invested in, that's worth millions and millions of dollars. So, you know what? Who cares if a billionaire is getting rich if you can still become rich yourself? Okay? So anyway, after this, the guy goes on to this rant about race. And I want to just read a little part of this because it just shows you the mentality of the left. He says, what? You want segregation? that got promoted under states' rights? Yeah, I want states' rights. I don't care about segregation. Who cares about that? That's a dead issue. You know, the left always want to bring up the past, and they want to do all this stuff that's harmful for minorities. They want to separate minorities by their race, by their sex. You know, if you go around talking to people like they're different, then they become different. Just treat everybody equal. That's all we've ever said. Do you want to discriminate against black people? Well, that's, you know, right off the bat, there you go, the black thing again. You elect a guy that was sued for discrimination on 2 separate occasions, sued in Atlantic City, 1991, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, you know what? A lot of people in New York were sued back then, but Donald Trump gave black people a home in Trump Tower. He gave people donations, money to help all kinds of charities in minority areas. He's done more for black people than President Obama ever did. And the stats prove it. They prove it. He took the black community leaders into the White House for meetings to see how they could fix the problems. He's been trying to address crime in places like Chicago, Baltimore. And blacks were left worse off by every metric, more so than any other time since the 1960s after 8 years of Obama. So just think about that. You know, he goes on and says, you want to praise capitalism for all its good? Go to Mexico and see how much good it did there. Go further south into Latin America. Dude, I've lived in Mexico. I've lived in Latin America. I've lived in El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras. My wife is from Central America. Her family are the opposition, the oligarchs in the opposition to communism there. All those countries are communists. They're all communists or socialists. And the policies of those communists and socialists have destroyed that area. Capitalism didn't do that. They begged for capitalism there. That's why so many of them flee to here for capitalism. You have to break your brainwashing, man. Go out and see the world. Look at it through other people's eyes and don't sit there in your bubble listening to this crap on MSNBC and thinking you're so enlightened, because you're not. Red pilled out.